Let me ask you a question that's been on my mind recently. Have you ever had a game that you remember loving a lot when you were younger, and then you go back to it years later and you see how flawed it is, but you still enjoy it? Now, I'm not talking about games like Goat Simulator, which was meant to be bad, but rather games where the devs sincerely tried, even if the product turned out bad. But they were, however, fun in some way, whether it be through glitches, certain moments from the game itself, or some other aspect of the game you really enjoyed. And for me, that game is 2005's Crash Tag Team Racing. Often considered the black sheep of the Crash Bandicoot racing games, Tag Team Racing is a curious case of a game that seems like it wants to be several games in one, with its platforming hub world, racing gameplay that drastically differs from the last two, mini games in between, and a cast of characters much wackier than ever before.
It's so beautiful!
To understand what this game is about, first let's step back to the 2000s for a bit. Now, it should go without saying that Crash's track record in this decade was not the best. After being dropped by Naughty Dog, Crash was thrown around to different developers like a sports journeyman who's getting wrung out of his last bit of talent, in the hopes that one of these developers could make games that were as good as the original trilogy and CTR. This resulted in games like The Wrath of Cortex and Crash Nitro Kart that were decent enough, but they lacked the quality and novelty of the originals. Or you get games like Twinsanity that had plenty of potential, if you were to look at all the content it has, but it missed the mark due to time constraints. This brings us now to Tag Team Racing, a game that continued the trend of mixed reception the series had gained up to this point. But I didn't care, because back then I was a dumb as bricks 5-year-old and thought it was the funniest shit I've ever played. But now I'm a wise and opinionated 22-year-old, and this begs the question, do I feel the same way about it now? Obviously, there's only one way to find out. Starting with the story, the game follows Crash and company at a theme park called Motor World, where the owner of the park, Von Clutch,
this ugly green lima bean,
tries to convince them to join his competition, where contestants will have to race across the park's 5 areas and recover the stolen power gems, with the prize being the deed to his entire park, no questions asked. Cortex sees this as a chance for a new evil base and agrees to join, and the Bandicoots do the same in order to stop him. And after a quick riddle from
Perhaps a riddle or two!
this horrifying fruit monster, whose name wouldn't sound out of place in a Portal film, the adventure begins. And that's pretty much the story. It's okay. It doesn't really get brought up till the last area, but it's a passable story overall. I mean, it's a racing game, so if the story takes the back seat and not the shotgun. The characters, though, I'll get to them later. As for the gameplay, oh boy, there is a lot to unpack with this game. So, Tag Team Racing isn't just a racing game, it's also a platformer, and there are some mini-games as well. But I want to start with the racing gameplay, as this is a racing game after all, and also because of the fact it's drastically different from CTR. How, you may ask? Well, remember CTR's kick-ass drift system, where you have to hop with one trigger and then hit the opposite trigger to change speed boost? Well, Tag Team Racing chucks that system out the door, and instead what you get is a racer that at first seems pretty generic, but there are a few things added to shake the races up. Like the health bars that will lower when you get hit by items and will eventually cause you to blow up when it's empty. But the main gimmick that sets the racing in this game apart is the clash system. At any point in the race, you can press a button that will turn you into a ghost and allow you to fuse with another racer. How the cars can do this is never explained, but that doesn't stop this from being kinda fun. Clashing gives you and your temporary partner several helpful perks, like increased health, items more powerful than the ones you get unclashed, which are strangely satisfying to hit enemies with, but those items pale in comparison to the turret that mounts itself onto your car, which turns the game into Mario Kart Double Dash if the racers packed heat. And all 8 characters each have their own unique and creative turret weapon, which gives you a reason to try out each character, like Pasadena, who has a crossbow that shoots spinning tops, Coco's gun shoots health-draining magnets, Cortex has an energy cannon, Von Clutch has a cluster bomb launcher, and Crunch has a fucking Gatling gun. On paper, this is a fun mechanic. That sadly has a few flaws that make it easy to abuse. For one thing, you can stay clashed as long as you want, and if you unclash, there is no cooldown, which means if you run out of ammo, you can quickly clash with the same racer to continue mowing down the opponent, and all of these flaws make the mechanic even more easy to abuse when you find out you only have to fuse with one of 2 certain characters, and those characters are Engine and Nina. Engine has a rocket launcher which kills in 2 hits, and Nina has a shotgun which is just as powerful. Granted, it's better at short range, but even then you'll still take the bogeys out, and on top of Nina and Engine's overpowered guns, the beefed up items you get when clashed one-shot everyone, and you're encouraged to get as many KOs, or let's be honest, kills, because the cars blow up and Crash and company should be fucking dead, because winning races not only nets you coins that can be spent in the game's hub world for various items, but the more racers you blow up in a race, the more bonus coins you'll earn, and if you clash with Nina or Engine, you'll rack up a ton of KOs. Take this race on the second track of Mystery Island for example. With a combination of Nina's gun and the beefed up power-ups, I got 37 KOs. 37, despite there being 6 racers. And for the record, I had the difficulty set to hard for the races, as I would assume that would make the game more challenging, but I destroyed the competition anyway. I'll admit there were races where I finished second or had to drop the difficulty down, but that doesn't deny how broken the clash system is. And I know what you're thinking. Thomas, couldn't you just not clash? Nothing is stopping you from not abusing the clash system. Well, no duh, nothing's stopping me from abusing it, but why wouldn't I when they give me the option to anyway? And good luck if you choose not to clash, because not clashing leaves you a very vulnerable target that can be taken out in 1 or 2 hits. And driving isn't very fun, as the drift system used to build up a boost doesn't work all that well, because you need to be going fast enough, and that's only possible at higher speed settings. And even then, you're better off just clashing with the AI and letting them drive while you gun down everyone. As for the track design, it's pretty generic and flat, likely built that way with the clash system in mind. Presentation-wise, the 15 tracks spanning the 5 areas fit with their respective themes, but gameplay-wise, they don't really have much going on aside from some unique set pieces like the giant in Track of the Beanstalk, or the geysers in Libera Car Pits, or the snowballs in Tire and Ice. Some tracks do have shortcuts that can be unlocked by finding secrets in the hub world, but overall, the tracks are still pretty uninteresting compared to the tracks of CTR and CNK, which had more challenging obstacles and unique layouts. So yeah, the gameplay is fun in theory, but in reality suffers from some poor balance and design decisions, leading to an experience that gets boring after a while. The game also offers up a battle mode and a decently interesting stunt mode, but they suffer from some of these same issues, so I don't really have a lot to say about them. But do you know what I have a lot to say about? This game's platforming. Just like the originals, Tag Team Racing's Adventure Mode has hub worlds to travel to in between races, but instead of driving around, the developers for some reason built a whole platforming game to get around instead. And it's surprisingly well done. Hell, I'd say it's the highlight of the game. The areas are very dense and have pockets of crates to break, and they have a lot of verticality. And fitting with the theme park theme, there are lots of things to do aside from the main attractions. Not only do you have races, you can also buy all sorts of cool stuff with your coins, like costumes for your characters and crystals which you need to unlock new areas. There are also 2 types of minigames, bowling and shooting, which are also pretty fun. The bowling one I played a ton when I was younger. The shooting games, on the other hand, are a bit of a mixed bag. But the main thing to do in the hub world are missions to unlock other cars. Each character gets 3 cars that, as far as I can tell, function the same in terms of stats. The icons shown when selecting the cars appear to represent what event they're best suited for, but you can use a car not meant for the event and win. They do look cool though, and a good chunk of these cars would return in Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, and even some of the costumes in this game can also be bought in that game. But in the end, the real fun of the hubs is discovering this. So yeah, one of the things to find in the hub areas are dioramas, which are basically collectible Crash Bandicoot death animations, and they are really funny. Sometimes brutal, sometimes juvenile, but still funny, and getting all of them unlocks a diaper costume for Crash, if you're into that kind of stuff. Actually, while I was going through the dioramas, I saw that there's 3 of them where Crash gets eaten whole by a Yeti. I'm not one to kink shame, but someone on the dev team must have mixed their special interests in when they made these. You've also got gags, which mostly have Crash being a dick to the park workers. Which, funnily enough, leads me to another feature of the hub worlds, which is beating the shit out of the patrons in the park. Seriously, you can just attack them and no one will stop you. And I'm sure many of you who have worked in retail will find this stress relieving, or with all the annoying customers you wish you could go GTA on. You could even beat up the kids and make them cry, and even the other racers, including your sister.
You had to hit me, just had to do it.
Sorry, Coco, but it's my duty as your older brother to be mean to you. But whatever you do, don't hit Stu because, yeah, that. Now, of course, the main things to collect in each area are mission items, which are required to unlock some of the cars, and crystals, which can be found in the hub areas, bought from park workers, or acquired as an extra reward for completing some missions. In fact, you can get most of the 8 crystals you need to unlock the first jump pad to get access to the new area by the time you finish a single race, which only nets you 2, which really makes me question if Radical Entertainment wanted this to originally be a platformer. It's like the devs were making a platformer and the director comes in and says, hey guys, I got a word from our publisher and they actually wanted us to make a racing game. And then he sees the team making a platformer and then realizing the game ships in 3 weeks had to make the devs create a separate racing mode for the game, resulting in it being very flawed. But despite the flaws, what has kept me coming back to this game all these years? What is it about this game that has resonated with me after all these years? Honestly, it's the tone of the game. The overall tone can be summarized by the name I used for the profile. Stupid, but also hilarious. Now, Crash Twinsanity was a comedic adventure, but Tag Team Racing kicks it up several notches, which you'll notice easily on the loading screen where you can make burp and fart sounds. You'll also notice this with the items you pick up when racing. Most of them are animals like chickens, cows, and monkeys with TNT on their back that are cooler than those bored apes. You do also get some power-ups like a screaming fireball, submarine, and a piano. All items you'd see in a Looney Tunes cartoon, which is kind of fitting as that was the original idea of Crash. And while some of the items are broken, they add to a chaotic vibe that makes the races somewhat enjoyable. As for the characters, they're just all over the place. Take Engine for example, he has that typical nutcase scientist personality, voiced amazingly by Nolan North, but in one mission you have to help him feel pretty by getting him a ballerina costume, which is just rather jarring, and he might say this when you talk to him.
Crash, have you seen my sense of morality? Oh well.
But to move on to something less depressing but kind of horny, if you hit Pasadena, she might tell you this.
Stop whooping me.
Christ, it's as if she really wants Crash to ride her. And for this orange furball, if there's no hog, bear, or scientist, he'll gladly take the nearest possum. My favorite character in the game by far is Crunch because they chose to make him a Mr. T parody for some reason, which sounds stupid, I know, and I understand why some Crash fans don't like this portrayal of him, but me, I love it.
Crash! Sup, little brother? Enough jibber jabber.
Jibber jabber. That's such a funny thing to say. Honestly, it's the jibber jabber that really makes the Radical Entertainment version of the Crash cast stand out compared to other versions of the cast, because you could just be playing the game and then you could just hear Coco go,
Yes! Yes! Yes!
which, yeah, there is a lot to unpack with that, but it's just so random and it just comes out of nowhere that I just can't help but laugh at everything the characters say.
I'm terribly sorry. Not.
No! The sweet pain!
Ooh, now I do feel guilty about that one.
Because that maneuver, the understeiben Riesentroven treiben fließen Böhmenwaffen stieß.
Oh, and the music. How could I forget the music? The soundtrack is all a cappella, which, if you don't know what a cappella is, it's basically just using your mouth to make the music. No instruments are used. And it was done by Spiralmouth, who also did the excellent soundtrack for Twinsanity, and here, the soundtrack is just as good. All of these elements combined are what make Tag Team Racing entertaining. Sure, it might not be the best in terms of driving gameplay, but the world you explore within the park, all the things to discover within, and racing against the wacky cast make Tag Team Racing's adventure mode an experience not seen in any other racing game. And in the end, Crash and company discover the real culprit was Willy Wumpa Cheeks and capture him. They defeat Cortex with the power of poultry, get Von Clutch's power gem back, and all is good in the world. Then Crash knocks out Von Clutch's power gem and kills him. And that's Crash Tag Team Racing. As much as this game is all over the place in terms of all the things it tries to do, God help me, I had fun with it. Don't get me wrong, this game has its issues. The clash system is unbalanced, the driving feels stripped, the track design isn't interesting outside of some set pieces, and the platforming is more fun than the racing, but I think because it's a mess, it stands out. You're never really gonna find another game like this on the market, as every game sticks to one form of gameplay, but this one doesn't, which makes Tag Team Racing an enigma worth checking out for that reason alone. But with that said, this is Toasty Thomas saying thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.